The small-town main street bustled in the clear light of day. Neighbors chatted outside shops, a delivery truck rumbled past, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from the corner bakery. But the normal rhythm of the afternoon cracked apart with the sharp command of a uniformed officer. "Move along, old man. Tired of cleaning up your kind." Patrick Miller stood motionless beside the bulletin board outside the hardware store, where he had paused to read the worn slips of paper offering odd jobs. His coat was frayed at the cuffs but buttoned with care. His hands rested at his sides, fingers still, as though holding back a storm of memory. The officer's voice rose louder, drawing attention. Heads turned, shopkeepers, a mother holding her child's hand, two teens leaning on their bikes. The officer stepped forward, seized Patrick's arm, and yanked him roughly toward the patrol car. The veteran's cap slipped free, landing at his feet. In the sudden quiet, his silver hair caught the sunlight, cropped neat in the style of a man who had once worn a helmet into battle. A hush spread through the onlookers. The sound of the breeze rustling a flag on a nearby pole filled the space where no one spoke. Patrick's boots scuffed the concrete, but his stance did not falter. His voice, calm and unshaken, carried across the street. "I served so you could wear that badge." A murmur passed through the gathering crowd. The mother drew her child closer as the boy looked up, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Why are they hurting the grandpa?" Far off, faint but steady, came the low, rhythmic thrum of approaching engines, the kind that make a person stop and listen. The sun rose early that morning, casting soft gold across Patrick Miller's modest house at the edge of town. The roof showed its years. The porch creaked beneath his boots, but the small American flag near the door caught the breeze, bright against the clear sky. Each dawn, without fail, Patrick stepped onto the porch to adjust its line, smoothing the folds with hands marked by work and time. Inside, his home reflected a life of quiet discipline. The bed was made with tight corners, the floors swept clean, the air carrying faint traces of wood polish and old paper. A single photograph rested on the mantel, his late wife's smile captured in younger days. Near it, a small wooden box held his medals and keepsakes, untouched, kept not for pride but remembrance. His breakfast was simple, black coffee and dry toast. He ate in silence, the soft ticking of a clock filling the room. Afterward, he dressed with care. Though the coat was worn, it was clean. His boots, cracked with age, bore a polish that caught the morning light. He straightened his collar in the hallway mirror, smoothing silver hair cropped close, the mark of the Marine he once was. Patrick took to the streets with steady purpose, past the park where children's laughter rang, along elm-lined sidewalks, down to the town's main street where life bustled. He returned the nods of neighbors, the mailman, the grocer, a man sweeping his storefront, though their greetings were distracted, hurried by their own worries. At the hardware store, he paused by the familiar bulletin board. His gaze moved over the slips of paper, yard work, hauling, small jobs for small pay. He studied one offering work nearby, committing the number to memory. He had no phone, no pen, only the quiet determination to earn his way, as he always had. As he read, a sudden gust of wind stirred the papers, setting them fluttering like restless birds. Patrick blinked against the dust, but his eyes grew distant. The breeze carried more than the smell of fresh bread and warm asphalt. It carried him back. For a moment, Patrick was elsewhere. In that instant, the town faded. The wind became the blessed touch of cooler air after 3 days inside what felt like a sealed jar, the jungle pressing close with its choking, stale breath. The sun burned high, but its heat was nothing beside the weight of what Patrick and his unit had witnessed. They had arrived too late. The camp lay in ruin, ambushed before the rescue could reach them. Equipment smashed beyond use, ammunition scattered and useless. And the bodies, stacked, fallen, broken. Men Patrick had shared meals with, traded jokes with, faces he could not forget. No mercy had been shown. The advanced medical unit worked in grim silence, searching for any sign of life. Then, a shout. Hope strained thin but unbroken. A survivor. They found him in a ravine, 10 minutes from the camp's edge, nearly swallowed by water and mud. Fred Simmons. Fred's ribs were shattered, his lungs struggling with each breath that gurgled through blood. His fingers were torn and raw from clawing at roots, trying to climb free. They placed him on a stretcher with care, medics working fast. Patrick knelt beside his friend, mud soaking through to the skin, hands steady, though his heart threatened to break. Fred had been drafted the same week as Patrick. They'd sweated through boot camp together, shared bunks, stood watch side by side. Fred was the kind of man who gave without thought, the last of his rations, the dry spot under a lean-to, the shirt off his back if it meant a comrade could rest. With muddied fingers, Fred pressed his dog tags into Patrick's hand, his breath shallow, his gaze steady despite the pain. His voice came low, ragged, but clear enough to mark the moment forever. "Don't let them forget us, Patrick." The medics worked, but the life drained from Fred even as they tried. Patrick felt the weight of loss, as sharp as any wound. He carried that day in his bones, a vow unspoken, never to abandon, always to stand. And now, as the wind tugged at the papers on the bulletin board, the memory surged behind his eyes, as real as the street beneath his feet. A horn sounded, snapping the present back into focus. The sound of boots on concrete, the sharp bark of a command. And Patrick turned, knowing that the next test of his strength was already upon him. The wind settled as swiftly as it had risen, leaving the slips of paper pinned against the bulletin board like silent witnesses to what came next. Patrick adjusted his coat, drawing a steadying breath. But before he could turn away, a voice cut through the hum of the town, sharp, commanding, and edged with irritation. "You heard me, old man. Move along. We're not running charity out here." Police Officer Daniel Reese was broad and square-jawed, his face set in a scowl that spoke of a day already soured by small frustrations. His grip was firm, his movements brusque. A man quick to judgment, slower to see the whole picture. The gleam of his badge catching the afternoon sun. His tone carried enough force to turn heads. Shopkeepers paused mid-task. A mother stilled her stroller, and two teenagers leaning against their bicycles stopped their quiet chatter. Patrick met the officer's gaze, unflinching. "I'm not looking for charity," he said, his voice low, even, just work. But the officer, blinded by assumption, saw only what he chose to see. "Don't play smart. I've had enough of this today." Impatient, he grabbed Patrick's arm, rough, insistent, and with a sharp tug, pulled him from the board. Patrick's cap fell, landing in the dust. The silver hair beneath shone bright in the sun, cropped with the same precision as it had been decades ago beneath a helmet. "You're under arrest," Officer Reese snapped, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. His tone left no room for question, only command. A hush fell across the street. The clatter of a dropped wrench from the nearby garage rang louder than it should have. A sparrow startled from a rooftop, wings beating against the still air. Patrick did not resist, though his boots dragged slightly on the concrete as the officer hauled him toward the waiting patrol car. His back remained straight, his gaze forward, each step measured. "I served so you could wear that badge," he said quietly. A ripple moved through the small crowd. The mother drew her child closer, the boy's wide eyes fixed on the scene. "Why are they hurting the grandpa?" he asked, his voice small, uncertain, the kind that could break a heart. Mr. Alvarez, from the shop across the way, stood frozen for a moment. His hands, which had been arranging a display, now gripped the edge of the table. His mind raced. Just moments ago, his cousin, Captain Jason Alvarez, had stopped by on the way to a memorial event, accompanied by a small group of Marines in uniform. They had shared a few words, a handshake, a smile, and now this. Without a second thought, Mr. Alvarez stepped inside his shop, reaching for the phone. His fingers trembled slightly as he dialed, breath shallow with urgency. "Jason," he said when the line picked up, his voice low, urgent. "It's Patrick. They're hurting him. You have to come back." Outside, the officer continued his task, heedless of the eyes upon him. He opened the door of the patrol car. guiding Patrick inside with a force that betrayed impatience rather than necessity. The town watched, silent, as if the world itself held its breath. Officer Daniel Reese's grip remained tight on Patrick's arm as he guided him into the patrol car, his jaw clenched, his expression hard. He was broad, square-jawed, the kind of man whose temper frayed easily on difficult days. His movements were brisk, impatient, a man who saw what he expected to see, not what was truly in front of him. The small crowd stood in uneasy silence. Some shifted their weight, glancing at each other as if searching for the right to speak. A young woman raised her phone, recording quietly, her brow furrowed with concern. The child who had spoken before clutched his mother's hand tightly, his eyes wide, unblinking. Inside the nearby shop, Mr. Alvarez gripped the phone as if it were a lifeline. His words had been few, but urgent. "Jason, it's Patrick. They're hurting him. You have to come back." On the other end, Captain Jason Alvarez did not hesitate. The connection was brief, but the meaning clear. The vehicle he traveled in turned without ceremony, tires crackling over gravel as the small convoy of Marines changed course, headed back toward the town's center. At the station, Officer Reese closed the car door on Patrick with a thud that seemed louder than it should have been. He turned back toward the entrance, only now beginning to register the faces watching him. The uncertainty, the dawning awareness that perhaps this scene was not as simple as he had thought. The faint sound of engines approached, low and steady, growing louder with each breath the town took. At first just a murmur beneath the breeze, but soon unmistakable. The kind of sound that drew attention, that made heads turn toward the road. From the corner came the convoy, Captain Jason Alvarez at its lead, a small group of Marines in full dress uniform behind him. They moved with purpose, their faces set not in anger, but in resolve. The sight of them commanded respect, without a word spoken. They pulled to a stop before the station, stepped from their vehicles, and without needing signal or command, formed a line at the station's steps. Uniforms crisp, posture straight, they stood as silent witnesses to the injustice unfolding. Jason stepped forward, his voice steady, carrying so that all could hear. "You've got a Bronze Star recipient in there, Officer Reese. That man carried my father's best friend out of enemy fire in '68. You're dragging a hero." A hush deeper than any before settled over the crowd. The weight of Jason's words hung in the air, undeniable. Officer Reese stood still, the beginnings of uncertainty flickering behind his hard gaze. The crowd, once quiet in confusion, now watched with the first stirrings of recognition and shame. And Patrick, inside the patrol car, lifted his eyes and met Jason's across the distance, a silent bond passing between them, one born of honor, of memory, of the promise never to let them be forgotten. The silence on the street deepened as the Marines held their formation, a line of unwavering resolve before the station. The afternoon sun glinted off their brass buttons and polished insignia, casting long, sharp shadows onto the concrete. Even the breeze seemed to pause, as if unwilling to disturb the moment. Captain Jason Alvarez stepped closer to the patrol car, his gaze steady on Officer Reese. "It's time you opened that door, sir," he said, voice firm but measured, leaving no room for defiance. Officer Reese hesitated, his hand hovering over the latch as if the weight of his own mistake had at last settled onto his shoulders. Slowly he opened the door. Patrick stepped out, his movements slow from age, but marked by a dignity that no man could take from him. He adjusted his coat, bent to retrieve his fallen cap from the dust, and placed it back upon his silver hair with care. His back remained straight, his chin lifted, as he turned to face those who had come for him. Jason raised his hand in salute, crisp and sure, and his Marines followed without hesitation. The gesture, simple yet profound, was answered by Patrick, his right hand rising, fingers brushing the brim of his cap in a return salute that trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the depth of emotion that welled within him. The crowd, once unsure, now erupted in applause, not loud, but steady, as if they too wished to honor what they had nearly failed to see. The young boy who had asked, "Why are they hurting the grandpa?" stepped forward beside his mother, small hand raised in his own salute, eyes bright with wonder and respect. Patrick's gaze softened as he saw the boy, as if in that single gesture the promise he had made long ago was renewed, that no one would forget. For a long moment, the street was filled with nothing but the sound of clapping hands, the rustle of the flag above, and the quiet strength of a man who had given much and asked for little. The street had fallen into a silence so complete that the rustling of the flag above the station sounded louder than it ever had before. The line of Marines stood as if carved from stone, their uniforms immaculate, their boots polished to a mirror's shine. The sun caught on their brass buttons and insignia, glinting bright against the dark cloth of their dress blues. Even the breeze seemed to respect the stillness of the moment, carrying only the faintest scent of warm asphalt and the distant sweetness of blooming magnolia. Captain Jason Alvarez took a step forward, his boots crisp against the pavement, his gaze fixed on Officer Reese. His voice was steady, not raised, but carrying with it the authority of a man who had seen the cost of service. "It's time you opened that door, sir." His words hung in the air, gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Officer Reese's hand trembled slightly as it hovered near the latch of the patrol car. The hardness in his face had softened, replaced by a dawning understanding of what his actions had nearly erased. The weight of shame was new to him, and heavy. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled the handle and opened the door, the hinges creaking in the quiet like a confession. Patrick stepped out, his movements slow, but there was nothing broken in his bearing. His boots met the pavement with purpose. He bent, carefully, and retrieved his cap from where it had fallen. The dust clung to the brim, and he brushed it clean with a hand that shook just once before finding its strength again. He settled the cap on his silver hair, adjusting it with the same precision he had given to countless tasks in his years of service. His back straightened, his shoulders squared, and his eyes lifted to meet those of the men who had come for him. Jason's right hand rose in a salute, sharp, sure, the gesture of one who knew the meaning behind it. Without hesitation, every Marine in that line mirrored him, their hands moving as one, a silent chorus of respect. Their faces were solemn, their eyes steady, bearing witness to a man who had once done for others what now was being done for him. For a heartbeat, Patrick stood motionless. Then his own hand rose, slow but sure, fingers brushing the brim of his cap. The salute trembled at first, not from frailty, but from the swell of emotion that surged through him, the weight of memory, of loss, of a promise kept across decades. His eyes glistened, but no tears fell. His dignity held, unbroken. The small crowd that had gathered on the street, drawn first by confusion and then by the sight of the Marines, began to follow as Patrick was led toward the nearby station. Their footsteps filled the quiet, a soft, collective murmur of movement, as if the town itself felt compelled to bear witness. By the time the salutes rose, dozens stood clustered before the station steps, their faces turned toward Patrick, their expressions shifting from curiosity to reverence. The crowd that had gathered, once unsure and silent, now found its voice. A ripple of applause began, soft at first, then stronger, steadier, as more hands joined in. It was not loud or boisterous, but reverent, as if they too understood that this was no ordinary moment. The clapping echoed down the street, a quiet symphony of recognition that filled the space between the salutes and the stillness. When the first ripples of applause echoed, the sound carried through the open doorways and windows of the station. One by one, officers and staff emerged, drawn by the unfamiliar cadence of respect that filled the air. They stepped outside, some shading their eyes against the sun, some standing motionless as they took in the scene unfolding before them. The Marines, the saluting veteran, the gathered townspeople united in a moment of recognition too long delayed. The young boy who had questioned the injustice earlier stepped out from behind his mother's side. His small hand rose in imitation of the Marines, his palm pressed flat, his fingers straight, his eyes wide with wonder. Patrick saw him, And in that small figure, he saw the future, the promise that remembrance would live on. For a long while, nothing else mattered. The noise of the world faded, leaving only the sound of hands meeting in respect, the gentle snap of the flag in the breeze, and the presence of a man who had given his strength for others and asked for nothing in return. The applause faded slowly, as if the town were reluctant to let go of the moment. The Marines lowered their hands in unison, their salute complete, but their stance remained firm, not in defiance, but in solidarity. Patrick stood among them, shoulders squared, his cap still tipped in respect, his gaze sweeping the faces that had come to stand with him. Officer Daniel Reese lingered a few steps back, his eyes lowered now, the sharp lines of his face softened by the weight of what he had seen. The man who, minutes before, had acted from assumption and impatience, now found his voice caught behind the lump rising in his throat. The badge on his chest felt heavier, as if its meaning had deepened in a way he had not expected, nor earned. Word spread through the town in the hours that followed. The story of the Marines, the salutes, the applause. It moved from porch to porch, from shop counter to kitchen table, growing not in exaggeration, but in the quiet significance of truth shared. By evening, the town council had called a meeting, and in the room where civic matters were usually met with weary discussion, the air was thick with purpose. Officer Reese stood before the gathered townspeople, his uniform crisp, but his posture no longer proud. His voice, when it came, was steady but low, carrying the humility that only hard lessons bring. He spoke not to defend himself, but to acknowledge. "I misjudged a man today," he said, pausing as if to steady his thoughts. "I let my frustration speak where respect should have, and I have a duty now, not just to Mr. Miller but to all those like him, to do better." The room was silent as his words settled. Then, one by one, nods of agreement began, not of approval for the wrong done, but of recognition that this was the first step towards setting it right. The police department announced new training that evening, not a hollow gesture, but a program shaped with the help of veterans in the community, designed to teach respect, understanding, and the stories behind the uniforms that had once been worn. A plan was made for a plaque to be placed at the station, bearing the names of local veterans who had served, so that no one who passed through its doors would forget again. And in the days that followed, the town carried itself a little differently, as if in honoring one man, they had rediscovered the meaning of honor itself. The days that followed the town's reckoning were quieter, but the memory of that afternoon lingered in every corner of the streets, in every glance exchanged between neighbors. The flag outside Patrick Miller's modest home caught the breeze each morning as he adjusted it, his hands steady, his routine unchanged. But in his heart, he carried a small, new peace, not from the ceremony, not from the applause, but from the knowledge that the promise he had made so long ago to Fred Simmons had been honored once again. One evening, as the sun slipped low behind the elm trees and bathed the town in soft gold, the creak of boots on Patrick's porch announced a visitor. Officer Daniel Reese stood there, cap in hand, his posture no longer stiff with authority, but respectful, uncertain. He held 2 cups of coffee, their steam rising in the cool air like a quiet offering. Patrick regarded him for a long moment before nodding once and gesturing to the empty chair beside him. Without a word, Reese sat down, placing 1 cup within Patrick's easy reach. The 2 men sat side by side, the silence between them filled not with tension, but with the unspoken weight of what had passed. It was Reese who spoke first, his voice low, measured. "I've got a lot to learn. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller." Patrick took a slow sip of the coffee, the warmth of it grounding him in the present. His gaze drifted across the yard to where the flag stirred gently. "We all have something to learn," he said, his tone not of reproach, but of quiet truth. "Sometimes the hardest lesson is to look past what we think we see." They spoke little after that. Words were not needed. The shared stillness said what could not be said aloud. That dignity, once overlooked, had been restored. That respect, once withheld, had been offered. As the light faded, Patrick rose and adjusted the flag one final time that evening. The cloth rippled softly in the breeze, a small but enduring symbol of service, sacrifice, and the strength found in forgiveness. The days that followed the town's reckoning were quieter, but the memory of that afternoon lingered in every corner of the streets, in every glance exchanged between neighbors. The flag outside Patrick Miller's modest home caught the breeze each morning as he adjusted it, his hands steady, his routine unchanged. But in his heart, he carried a small, new peace, not from the ceremony, not from the applause, but from the knowledge that the promise he had made so long ago to Fred Simmons had been honored once again. One evening, as the sun slipped low behind the elm trees and bathed the town in soft gold, the creak of boots on Patrick's porch announced a visitor. Officer Daniel Reese stood there, cap in hand, his posture no longer stiff with authority, but respectful, uncertain. He held 2 cups of coffee, their steam rising in the cool air like a quiet offering. Patrick regarded him for a long moment, before nodding once and gesturing to the empty chair beside him. Without a word, Reese sat down, placing 1 cup within Patrick's easy reach. The 2 men sat side by side, the silence between them filled not with tension, but with the unspoken weight of what had passed. It was Reese who spoke first, his voice low, measured. "I've got a lot to learn. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller." Patrick took a slow sip of the coffee, the warmth of it grounding him in the present. His gaze drifted across the yard to where the flag stirred gently. "We all have something to learn," he said, his tone not of reproach, but of quiet truth. "Sometimes the hardest lesson is to look past what we think we see." They spoke little after that. Words were not needed. The shared stillness said what could not be said aloud, that dignity, once overlooked, had been restored, that respect, once withheld, had been offered. As the light faded, Patrick rose and adjusted the flag one final time that evening. The cloth rippled softly in the breeze, a small but enduring symbol of service, sacrifice, and the strength found in forgiveness. The silhouette of a man who had given much and stood tall, even in the quiet of day's end. The last light of day gave way to the hush of evening, but the memory of what had been witnessed remained bright in the hearts of all who had seen it. The story of Patrick Miller was not one of fanfare or grand speeches, but of quiet strength, of dignity reclaimed, and of a promise kept across time and sacrifice. Today we remember, always forward. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you are watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.